Okay, Johnson, Gerby, Johnson. Uh, I think you've spoken fairly well for a whole lot of people who literally don't know what to do. And you can look around the internet without quite knowing how to do a search, and you'll end up often with people who want to offer self improvement. I have no problem with that. What you won't find is people willing to say, let's form a bundle of people, not a political party, like in the old days, but something, a cooperative, that's sometimes thought as a bad word, like confederation. It's thought to be bad because of a history of problems. We can form I say we, I don't want to necessarily include myself in this few remarks simply because I'm talking about other people who have some initiative. Now, the initiative that people have so far is to be sketchy about their situation and demonize the internet per se. That's like demonizing your telephone or your typewriter, or an old typewriter. That's like demonizing the roadway and traffic signs and so on. That's subject to some criticism. I mean, people are burning gasoline in terms of escapism at a rate that is far worse than a few electrons on the internet. Much more wasteful. And now they've got a new toy, these terrible Teslas that are not being deployed correctly. It's old technology that we're gagging on, I think, in terms of the Brett money going after them. There are a lot of things people are doing besides playing around with the internet. I myself, at 79, and with a bad back and diabetes, am not going to, join into the fray the way some people really can. But I'm not going to say that self-improvement is, joining the Marine Corps, although there is definitely a poverty draft. That is to say, people reconcile themselves to testing into positions in the military. They may have gone to college, and lo and behold, they find that the best thing they can do, really, is to test their way into the military the way we did. I say we, my generation, joined to avoid going to Vietnam. I worked in a hospital, and I was told I would never be sent anywhere but a hospital because they didn't have personnel who were able to do anything. I tested in and could do the work. So people could test into the military. And, you could end up, a lieutenant somewhere or what, or maybe a private, I don't know. But that would be better than what? Staying in the basement, as you say, or anything like that. But that's a problem. That's a default, and I think many people would know that, whether their dad's an executive with Marietta or not, or Honeywell, or IBM, or anything really. I'm not saying that should be the first choice, but it's a choice that many people take. They kind of throw in the towel and accept the military option. And then they'll probably be working with or for the graduates of the academies and so on. That's changing back and forth through the years. For a while, the service schools found themselves so beleaguered that they worked for somebody else, and they've pushed back, and now people work for them. Well, anyway, you know what the military says, and the politicians too. They say divide and conquer. Well, now, right now, people can discern that the internet is used to chop people into little atom-like particles uh, connected to the web. The web allows people to push back against failure with good ideas. But the people who can do that are few and far between, and if they stay that way, then they will have probably gone a whole generation before it dawns on some people that while some people can carry their own weight with, 1.5 million or 2 million viewers or whatever, there's a lot that could be bundled. Now we have some websites that offer all comers, a pigeonhole. But that's not what I'm talking about. For example, you go on the internet and you pay a paywall to read the New York Times, which runs a tight ship, a very tight ship. They kick people out all the time. They invite people in all the time. And it's a tight ship, and they, they've been able to continue because they started out on the web and faltered, but eventually that huge publishing outfit used its momentum to establish itself on the web. Others can't easily do that, although some have. Jacobin is a good example. They are devoted to some very loyal readers. There are some magazines that people recall, classical titles, and each of these groups tend to have writers that are good enough to be on the staff or something. Well, that's fine. Now, what does that mean for the average person eating takeout food or delivered? Well, you either have what it takes or you don't. And then to blame the internet for your failure would be like saying, well, I see the cars are all going out there, but I don't have one. Or something like that. Unfortunately, that's the reality. So if somebody has a useless degree, that doesn't mean that he therefore qualifies for useful employment. Some will and some won't. For example, if one is not, brilliant enough to win a Pulitzer Prize in economics, I've read a few, and sometimes it's embarrassing how obvious things are. But anyway, if one is not doing that, and maybe having a chair in a great school or something, then what can one do? One can run for some office, the school board or something, or one can just tend to bring like minds together. I know some people who use, I'm not smart enough to do it, but 3 or 4 will gather online for an online conference, and each in his own lane has already publicized the event, and many people tune in. Something would be absurd would be someone like myself to start streaming and nobody shows up. Nobody needs to do that. I have my problems with the staggering of connections sometimes. That's a different topic. But the topic is not to blame the internet. Because that's like blaming the telephone. Is the telephone a threat in your life? Well, now we have smartphones, but a lot of people just text with them. Okay, well then that says something about what's wrong. In other words, blaming the messenger won't do. Now, if someone like Johnson says just a little bit, or brings things to the attention of his watchers and readers or whatever, then that's something. But to blame the highway for not giving you a car to ride in, that just won't work. Short of that, there are things to do. Now then, if somebody notices that the gap between somebody on foot and in at least a fairly new car, or even a bicycle, is simply too great, then like-minded people should be able to coalesce and not remain divided by experts so that they can't do anything. You will remember the test case was the First Amendment suspension because of the health crisis. And one of the things that is included in that is not only the free press, but also what? The freedom of association and the freedom to gather and compare notes. If people don't learn to do that online or on the telephone or in person, then they will be abrogating that stuff in the Bill of Rights. And, you know, the Bill of Rights is not, hey, here's something free. You know, how about it? No. The truth is, the First Amendment is something extremely vital that has to be used. It's like saying, well, here's a nice car. Well, we see that you don't seem to be able to buy a car. Here's a nice car, but you'll have to buy the gasoline for it. Well, make what you will of analogies or whatever. They break down under careful scrutiny, but what I'm saying is the first error is to blame technology. That's like saying, well, you know, dual use. Well, that's true for a ballpoint pen, isn't it? For good or bad, or even in between. People have got to get over that. Now, you know, with a lot of people, they really are totally discouraged. And Canada, in not in Canada, in China, they say, I'm just going to lie flat. The young people say, I'm going to lie flat. There's nothing I can do. The whole system is rigged. Well, if enough people do that, that's fine. But turns out they're not really lying flat. They're networking and emboldening their systems with good ideas. If you don't have good ideas, then you ought to find another line of work. Who can come up with ideas? Well, you better find out. If you don't, then watch cartoons. And then if you watch cartoons, that doesn't mean that the internet's to blame. It's like a grocery store. You know, they have lane after lane of junk food. Most people, fortunately, still walk right past that. They don't mess with it. They go get, you know, the good food, and usually it's in the back of the store, so you have to walk through all the other stuff to get to it, and so on. Other people, you know, just really short circuit, and now that the SNAP program has had to outlaw certain purchases because that's all some people get. So, but does that mean the grocery store is to blame? Some people actually say yes, that free enterprise ought to be, you know, disciplined like they do in a totalitarian system, and a lot of people say we don't need to do that. An economy or a community, a nation has to be regulated by someone on the flight deck of an airplane. Airplanes do not fly themselves ordinarily, and they've come up with planes that have amazing electronic abilities, but when people are on board, they generally have always insisted that there's a licensed pilot, and what he does is maintain the security, the stability of the plane. That has to be done in an economy or a political system or whatever else. And recently, we've had to barricade the flight deck because of the crazy people who can buy a ticket on an airplane. That's partly because, the crazy people are proliferating because good ideas are not proliferating. Some people think that they should tell others to shut up. I know somebody just recently told me to shut up. And I felt like telling him exactly what I thought, but I didn't. And I've mentioned it differently to several people for what that's worth. I don't expect, though, that because nobody does anything about that, that therefore the internet is wrong and bad and no good. I don't mean to demonize anybody in particular. And I compliment Mr. Johnson for undertaking some touchy stuff that needs to be talked about, because I think there are many people who might be watching cartoons on their telephone or whatever, who might stumble across Mr. Johnson and might think, well, I think I'll Google for this or that. Who knows? Maybe something will turn up. I don't know. Or go inside YouTube. If Google is too broad, search something in YouTube. I've forgotten how many. I think 9 million uploads have been stored. You might find something more than, Donald Duck.